Absolutely. I taught for 8 years, and I taught in Calgary, down near Lethbridge and Picture Butte, and over in Scotland. And throughout that time, I started it just when I had started or finished in Calgary, and the blog was called Trails Optional. And its tagline or kind of subheading was Jen Deyenburg's journey through using technology. So it was as I was starting this journey into using and bringing more technology into education, I wanted to capture it, and I wanted to create almost a portfolio of all the things I was doing, all the things that were working really well, all the things that weren't working so well, and be able to share that and reflect on that and also get feedback. Because when you put it out there, often you get questions, you get feedback, you get people wanting to join you on projects, you get people giving you feedback on projects, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But the blog has been a place where it's captured everything I've done. So now when I look back at the blog and it's had 75,000 hits in a couple of years, it's really amazing to see that other educators are seeing value in what I'm doing, and it keeps me motivated to keep trying new things and keep innovating in the classroom and to keep sharing it, because it's led to so many different connections and different projects. And it's been a great way for students to see a little bit about me when they come into my classroom, because it's the first thing they do now is Google their new teacher. And when I started last year in Scotland, I went into the classroom and my students already had all these preconceived notions of all the things we were going to do because they'd read about what I'd done with every other class. And they were so excited to try new projects, and they were asking, are we going to try this? Do you have these tools? And it was a really interesting way to bring the classroom to the students before they'd even met me. I have my own personal blog at Trails Optional, and that's become a professional portfolio and was even responsible for me getting my last job because I linked to it in my job application. And my head teacher, principal in Scotland, was scanning through the application, clicked on it, and could instantly see what kind of teacher I was going to be in the classroom. But I've also used a lot of class blogs. And I've taught grade 5, I've taught grade 6, and I've taught kindergarten. And I've used blogs in all three scenarios. I started out with blogs as kind of a discussion forum, where it was one blog, I'd throw out a question, and students would submit answers as comments. This worked really well in math, to get some different math reflections and some thinking around how they were solving a problem. So it was a bit of a forum to start with. It wasn't really about writing, it was more about answering questions. And that eventually evolved into a more true sense of blogging, where I started with just a class blog, where each student had their own login, but we were all blogging on the same place. So they would write posts either with an assigned topic, or sometimes I'd leave it open. For example, we were reading the book Hatchet, and I asked them to write a post about 5 things they would take into the woods to help them survive. So they each had to pick their 5 things, pick rationale, and when they were done their post, they could go see what other people had picked and leave comments. And then I gave them the option to update their list if they saw things that other students had written. And eventually this evolved into each of them wanting their own space. They wanted their own space to customize what the page looked like, to put all their thoughts on their own blog. And I used different platforms. I started out on EduBlogs when it was still free. Now you have to pay for that service. I eventually moved into self-hosting my own blog using a WordPress platform on some server space that I set up. It's about $40 a year to pay for it. Some schools have their own server space set up, and it's evolved into me setting up server space so everybody in the school can use it. So now I run one main class blog, and then each student having their own individual blog, and this was at the grade 5, 6 level. And the students on their own blogs, they learned how to categorize, they learned how to tag, they learned how to embed, they learned how to add photos, they learned how to find their own voice. Because that was the problem with the big class blog, is they said, well, it doesn't really sound like me, and my posts get kind of buried with everybody else's. They wanted their own space to develop their own voice. And sometimes it was mandated what they'd post. So I'd say, you're writing about this topic. Other times it was, it's Friday, reflect on one piece of this week that was really good for you. What lesson or what activity really resonated with you. Sometimes it was recess, and that's okay, because the social aspect of school is just as important. So in grade 1, it was primary 1, so somewhere between kindergarten and grade 1. I took blogging to that level too. And we had one blog, and it was all about learning to use a keyboard as a writing tool. Because with my grade 1s, I found it just as important to teach them to use a keyboard as to teach them to use a pencil. because that's an input device that they're going to use for their entire lives. And it was a great way for us to learn capital letters, because if you've ever really looked at a keyboard, especially on PCs, they're capital letters. So that was the first obstacle we ran into, was they had to learn their capital letters in a hurry, but they wanted to, because they wanted to write. And we were only writing single sentences. They learned how to put pictures in, though. And their blog, it was called The Sandbox. They just loved it because they could write, and they're so enthusiastic, but they loved to write about our class pets and write 1 or 2 sentences about what our animals were doing. So it was a way for them to share their enthusiasm, and a way for them to learn keyboarding skills, and a way for them to learn capital letters. So it was hitting a lot of skills at once.